What's a rich people thing that rich people don't know is a rich people thing? Story 1. There was an article in Norway some years back asking rich people how they saved money. I think this was after the 2008 financial crisis. One billionaire, Stein Erik Hagen, answered that he was frugal by sending his old shirts back to his Savile Row tailor to have his shirt collars replaced. He suggested more people should save money like that. It has become an example in Norway of how absolutely clueless and detached some rich people are. Story 2. When I told my boss my wife was pregnant, she told me how we should go on a trip before the baby comes. She started talking about how much she enjoyed her recent trip to Hawaii. I'm just sitting there like, she's back in school, she's cutting hours at work. We have to care for a baby soon. Like, I'm not made of money, we can't all just go to Hawaii on a whim. Story 3. I'm by no means rich, like a millionaire or anything like that, but I have a decent job that pays well. I have worked minimum wage jobs in the past and have worked myself up through the years to be quite comfortable. I absolutely promise anyone who currently lives paycheck to paycheck, the richest I have felt was when I realized that I haven't checked the price of groceries in years. Like, I understand just how expensive things have gotten over the last 5 years, but I'm luckily at the level now where I go in to do my food shopping and just buy what I want, pay the bill, and leave. I'm not driving around in a Lambo or anything, but having the ability to just buy what you want, need, without looking at the price is just the best feeling ever, and a million miles from when I was living paycheck to paycheck. You legit don't need any more money than that. Once you can, but your day-to-day stuff without caring, then it brings you such a level of peace to your mind. Story 4. People who hire others for household tasks like laundry, housekeeping, grocery shopping, cooking, and yard work often assume everyone does the same. This might explain why they think you should work longer hours and have little time off. For us everyday folks, just managing housework can feel like having another job. Story 5. I find most of the rich people I meet are aware of the money advantages they have, but they often still underestimate the compounding effects that access to all kinds of experiences and opportunities has had on them. Not that they don't appreciate them, but they're not fully aware of the scope of the advantages. Story 6. The people in those Rocket Money ads that don't realize they have multiple subscriptions coming out of their account that they don't know about. How? Edit. Based on replies, anyone not noticing charges on their account is not living paycheck to paycheck. If you are well off enough to not live paycheck to paycheck, you are richer than you think. Story 7. Unpaid internships. So many people have no idea what a luxury it is to be able to gain valuable experience and contacts in your chosen field while in college. I could never afford to take an unpaid internship because I had to earn money to pay for my tuition, rent, and food. So while some of my classmates were working unpaid at law firms, I was delivering pizzas and working on a moving truck. Story 8. Starting off with help from mom and dad that allows them more flexibility in maneuvering their life than everyone else has. I've seen it a lot of times. Usually lovely, kind, caring people who certainly don't think of themselves as rich, aren't over the top about spending, live in the suburbs and have 2.3 kids and a dog, think they are where they are because they work just as hard as everyone else, think they have similar life problems to everyone else, and they may well work just as hard as everyone else and have any number of life problems. But because of the push they got at the beginning, usually in the form of down payment assistance on a house, their life is very different than many others. They don't see it that way. But the difference in having a $100,000 mortgage and a $200,000 mortgage is hugely enormous to what your monthly budget can look like. And truly rich enough parents can and do make that change happen for their kids. And then usually mom and dad, or their financial advisors, whose contact info they pass on, know the best ways to use extra money to make more extra money, whereas people who aren't in that position don't know or find out anything about these topics. Source. Grew up in a town and went to a university that were each quite financially diverse. I'm definitely not from the top or bottom ends of that diversity, but have seen many things since college that make it clear that the parents helping out thing is something that if it happens is a rich person thing that the kids don't realize fully is a game changer. Story 9. I have a few from family members. While we do all right, they are in another ballpark. Incorrect ordering. Family member ordered 2 Ducati bikes instead of 1 and ended up just giving the other to an employee. Another instance, we did bulk shopping for holidays and needed 20 pounds of sweet potatoes. The cashier incorrectly charged for 2,000 pounds. They didn't even notice until the warehouse called and told them about the mistake. Food waste. While they have a chef that comes in during the week, weekends are takeout, but it's an egregious amount of food from several locations, and 80% of it gets put in the takeaway fridge. Here it either gets thrown out or employees and family can grab food. Weekends are slower, so it often goes to waste. money and values. Unfortunately, their son became a problem child, and they've done everything they can to fix him. He's in his 40s now and will go on strike. They always cave in, and he winds up with a new car or another demand. In one instance, they paid his rent for a year in full, and he stayed there for a week before his roommate and him had a falling out over his partying tendencies. Story 10. I once met a dear old lady at a gas station. We were both filling up our cars. I just threw the petrol nozzle in and let it fill up, probably $100 worth in those days. She commented in a quavery voice, "I can always tell when people are wealthy. They can afford to fill their cars up right to the brim. I just put in $5 at a time when I can afford it." She wasn't expressing jealousy or animosity in the slightest. In fact, she was quite cheery about it. Bless her soul, I hope she's doing well. Story 11. Mortgages. Most people think the ultra-rich buys all their homes with cash in hand. That's not always true. Even Mark Zuckerberg took out a mortgage as a billionaire. The extremely low interest rates offered means he could invest his wealth immediately in other things. Story 12. Had a super wealthy boss that refused to give me a raise. Just outright wouldn't pay me more. He's turned around and spent hundreds of dollars on dinners. Dude was always wearing $500 plus shoes. He once offered me a piece of furniture. I loved it and thought it was simple, so he let me have it. His wife had ordered it from Europe, and they decided it didn't fit in their decor. I looked it up after I got home. It was worth as much as they paid me in a year. They're all nuts. Story 13. I have a niece who is clueless about finances and has always had money available to her. Growing up, she would always invite her friends and cousins to very expensive restaurants on her birthday or other occasions and expect everyone to chip in at the end for the bill. She got pissed at my son when he started declining her invitation, even when he explained he couldn't afford it. Story 14. As they get older, especially if they have worked but then stopped for whatever reason, they gradually lose touch with what normal pay is. I'm in my 30s, but a close friend of mine has family wealth and only worked for a couple years post-uni for her parents' company. And as progressive as she works hard to be, it's a nightmare trying to get her to understand what a livable wage is now. Her mother is the worst, though. She wants the sun and moon from people she won't pay more than $15 per hour, minimum wage where we live. Story 15. My wife once got stuck overseas during the pandemic. Her COVID test came back inconclusive at the airport, and there wasn't time to retest before her flight. The airline refused to let her fly and wouldn't refund her flight. My rich aunt happens to live in that city and heard what was going on. She offered to let my wife spend the night at her house and to pay for a new flight. She is an amazing lady. My aunt was out of town at the time, so she had her driver show up at the airport and drive my wife to the house. The driver had been told to give her pocket money for the evening. I then got a call from my aunt. She was all embarrassed and wanted to know if we always fly first class or if business class would be okay. Apparently, there were no more first-class tickets available for a few days, and she didn't know what to do. It literally never occurred to her that economy was an option, or that her nephew and his wife might never have flown business class, let alone first class. Story 16. Having a cushy life, not having to deal with normal adult stuff at all. I went to university with a bunch of students from well-off families. They didn't have an ostentatious lifestyle, but parents bought them a one-bedroom apartment, financed the education, bought them a modest car, paid for holidays. They didn't have a mega-rich lifestyle, but they sure never had to struggle to find an affordable place to stay or worry about how to finance all the books needed while still eating or how they were going to survive the summer breaks. They got a cushy internship job because of connections, and parents made sure they still had funds. After each exam, they would go somewhere to relax, SBA Mediterranean ski resort, while the rest of us were passed out, trying to get back together while eating ramen noodles. I can't imagine having such a stress-free, well-connected life from the beginning. Story 17. Easy networking. Rich people tend to know a lot of other rich people, and rich people are connected. References for elite colleges, internships, jobs, etc. are all circulated through roughly the same group. Someone's parent or brother-in-law or best friend definitely knows someone. Story 18. Buying a $300 gadget where a $20 gadget works just fine. Amazon, Smeg 50s, style retro toaster, $299.99. Amazon Basics, $19.99. I had a coworker, same rough salary, whose family was wealthy. For her new apartment, she bought a $1,000 coffee table, which looked very similar to my respectable solid oak one I paid $150 for. Buying a high-quality tool to fix a one-time, infrequent project versus renting same tool for one-third the cost. Things like expensive tile saws, industrial pressure washers. Story 19. This is vague, but not having to ever think about money as part of your daily activity. Within reason, anything you do, money isn't a consideration. Want a latte? Want a pastry with that latte? It's only a consideration of whether you want it or not. Want to go to lunch? Don't have to think about money. Don't have to think about which place because they are all easily affordable. Want that second round of beers, dessert? Want to go see that show this weekend? Want to see a movie and buy snacks there? All of those things, it's just do I want to or not? It's never that mental calculation of how much it is and if you can afford it. And then the second level of if you can, should you spend it? It's a huge level of worry, stress, and calculation that you just never have to make. Story 20. This is generalizing, but having good parents who are supportive and helpful to you. In the movies, rich parents are seen as absent, judgmental, or picky about their kids' decisions. In real life, rich parents are generally present and nicer to their children. I've also known rich parents to be more supportive of their kids' dreams and will go out of their way to help their kids accomplish them. In contrast, non-rich parents are more absent as they are working longer hours and have more stress going on, so they are less emotionally present for their children. There are fewer family bonding activities as those usually cost money. They are more likely to pass on judgment, especially when it comes to their children's goals. It's the idea of, I don't want you to be struggling like I did. My parents were not rich and flat out refused to contribute anything to me unless I chose a STEM field in college, and even then I still paid for my own schooling because they couldn't afford it. While in contrast, one of my friends grew up in a wealthy household, and his parents helped him out when he was starting a band. Story 21. Taking for granted that they don't have to do any chores, clean their home, do laundry, grocery shop, etc., and have zero respect for the fact that their employees do, and thus have minimal time to actually rest or enjoy themselves outside of work. Also, bragging about what clean freaks they are as if it's a virtue when they have a full-time housekeeper. I'm pretty damn sure their standards for cleanliness would fall dramatically if it was something they had to maintain all by themselves. Story 22. My father took pride in his effort to not appear to be wealthy. I think the term for that now is stealth wealth. He wore Target clothing, bought his suits at Men's Warehouse, drove an old Volvo, didn't wear a watch, flew coach when traveling, etc. But he had one vice: Oriental rugs. He felt that by not indulging in easily identifiable material extravagance made having over $800, 000 plus in rugs in our house, not a big deal, which I always found quite amusing. Story 23. Not knowing basic costs of things because either they just buy whatever they want whenever they want, or they have people who shop for them. I clean residentially for a living. Most of my clients are middle to upper middle and still shop. Some are clearly not, and clearly don't shop. I told a client they were out of paper towels, and she said, "Where would I get them? My shopper is on maternity leave." The client isn't an asshole or anything, but I don't think she's ever stepped foot in a grocery store in her life. Generational wealth situation. Story 24. I mean, technically, if you live in a first world country, then you're rich by default. Our poorest people are still richer than most of the world's population. So basically, most things we do on a daily basis. Just having to pay an electricity bill means you're rich. And if you can't pay the bill, it's likely because it's going to some other sort of privilege others don't have, like food in your fridge or a roof over your head. Sounds absurd, but it's true. Story 25. These threads are 99% what poor people imagine rich people live like. And 99% of that comes from other poor people flexing, trying to look rich. Actual rich people, like British nobility, are known for wearing the same coat until it needs elbow patches and driving a 40-plus yo Land Rover because they're trying to keep their wealth in the family in perpetuity. That's real wealth, generational wealth. They might pay big once up front, but in 200 years, people are still using the same fine plates at major events. If you look at Tim Ferriss-type tech bro life optimization tips, that's a lot of actual rich people stuff. Like a rich person will own, cough cough employ, a kid in Thailand and give the kid all their passwords. So the kid does all their social media and handles all their email and phone calls. The rich person can just own a soap bar style phone, and their assistant will phone or text them if anything happens. So they don't spend any part of their day doing crap, like having to Google a news story. They can just call their assistant and be like, "Hey, can you look up Elon's new crypto project and send me a one-page on what people are saying about it?" And the answer is actually checked by a human, not AI garbage. Story 26. Most recently, I felt richest when a poor lady outside a grocery store with her kid asked for $5, and I told her, "Let's just go get your groceries." As she put things in her cart, I knew in my mind that it didn't matter what she put in there. I would be able to afford it. She bought about $100 worth of groceries. As I drove home, I reminisced about when I was in similar situations like that in my 20s. My heart felt so thankful to no longer be in that situation that I wanted to sob uncontrollably my entire drive home. Story 27. I once talked to a rich guy about how I save money by cooking at home and rarely getting convenience food. He told me that I'm not actually saving money because a 1 hour grocery shopping and 1 hour food preparation are basically €200 in hourly wages, and hiring a chef or ordering food can be cheaper. I'm a student and I make 20 euro/hour. Story 28. I was talking to a guy about how hard it is to pay for college. I mentioned how I had a bunch of scholarships and worked the entire time and still had a ton of debt. He said he worked the whole time and didn't graduate with any debt. A couple minutes later, he said, "Oh wait, my parents paid for my college. How do you forget you went to college for free?" Story 29. Just taking a year off and not work while they figure themselves out. I've met multiple people with some form of trust fund. The trust fund pays for the essentials like housing, and they can work or not for spending money. I know it's possible to save up money to take an extended leave, and some people may do it later in life, but rich folks can just take a break at 30. Story 30. I was born when my mom and dad both worked full jobs to afford a council flat, and even then, they consistently failed to pay electrical bills, which they disguised as planned blackouts, where they made us pot noodle dinner before we lost power. Then they'd light candles for light. That was when I was about 5. Now I'm 16 and my parents split, but my dad worked hard enough to earn 40K-ish a year on normal hours, but 100K since he works 90 HRs plus a week. It feels so weird when he buys things without worrying too much. He'll spend hundreds of pounds every now and then for important stuff, but it's insane. I still worry about my dad's spending from when he used to say we couldn't afford nice things, but now it's like it's not even an issue. Sorry for the length here, I waffled. Story 31. I went to an expensive university. For me, it required a lot of financial aid, and I guess I assumed this was the case for others too. The financial aid would only cover the exact number of credits for the degree, so I audited some classes to keep from going over. Friends asked why, and I said otherwise I would never be able to afford senior year at full tuition. They were very confused. They had all been walking into the bursar's office once a year with a personal check for over $60,000. Story 32. One thing wealthy people often don't realize is a rich people thing is the ability to buy back time. It sounds straightforward, but it's easy to underestimate just how many ways the wealthy have access to shortcuts that save them hours, if not days, in their lives. And because it feels so ingrained, it's easy to forget just how out of reach those options are for the majority of people. Take a personal example. I once had a conversation with a friend who, though she didn't see herself as rich, was comfortably well off. She casually mentioned how, with her schedule, there was simply no way she could fit in mundane tasks like grocery shopping. To her, this was obvious. She had too much on her plate to spend hours going aisle to aisle. She'd been using a grocery delivery service for years, and on especially busy weeks, she'd even have a personal chef come by to prep meals for the week. For her, these conveniences weren't luxuries, they were necessities that freed her to focus on her business, family, and the parts of life she valued most. When she mentioned this, it took me a minute to realize what she was saying. I pointed out that a lot of people by necessity do spend hours shopping, cooking, handling repairs, and managing all the logistics of their day-to-day lives. It's not because they don't value their time, it's because they don't have the luxury of trading money to buy it back. She seemed a bit stunned. It had never occurred to her that this was anything but normal, or that this convenience could ever be seen as anything but a smart way to handle her time. For her, the idea of buying time was so embedded in her life that it didn't feel like luxury. It felt like common sense. She paid for convenience and efficiency in countless ways: next-day shipping, home cleaning services, skipping lines with fast passes, and private healthcare options that let her bypass wait lists. When her kids were little, she'd even hired a night nanny for the first few months so she could catch up on sleep. To her, each of these was just a practical decision, allowing her to maintain her life's momentum and focus her energy where it mattered. Yet this freedom to opt out of the daily grind is something the majority of people simply don't have. For most people, managing their own time means physically going to the store, waiting in line at the bank, getting on the phone to settle bills, or even tackling home repairs themselves. The hours add up, and so does the stress. But for those who can afford it, money becomes a kind of shield that softens life's friction points. And for many, it's such an ever-present part of life that they rarely stop to think of it as a luxury. This time-buying effect reaches into nearly every part of life. Take private healthcare as another example. People who can afford high-tier private insurance or direct pay models can skip the waiting game entirely. No months-long delay to see a specialist or waiting rooms stacked with people. Healthcare is handled on their own schedule with high-quality care on demand. Compare that to the average person, who may spend weeks, if not months, scheduling appointments, waiting for results, and planning around a healthcare system that demands their time but often provides minimal support in return. Another friend of mine once commented on this phenomenon after moving to a more expensive area for work. There, she said, time is the real currency. It was in everything. The car services, the Amazon Prime Now deliveries, the express lanes at every turn. Those who could afford it moved through life without nearly as much interruption, and that, she pointed out, made the difference between feeling calm and constantly feeling behind. Life just seemed smoother for the people around her, not because they were better at managing time, but because they had a support structure that allowed them to use money to control it. In the end, while the wealthy often see these as simple efficiencies or necessary investments, they are luxuries that define a vastly different quality of life. And because these options are often seen as just a smarter way to live, they're rarely acknowledged as true privileges, which makes it harder for the wealthy to see them as out of reach for others. For most people, time is simply something that can't be bought back. They have to spend it doing the things that for others would simply be outsourced. And it's this invisible line between essential and extravagant that makes this form of time buying one of the most understated luxuries of wealth. Story 33. Much of our happiness comes from working towards a goal and eventually achieving it. For example, wanting to buy a motorcycle. The very idea of it can give you a sense of happiness and excitement that can last you all the way up until you actually buy it. After that, the sensation will slowly taper off. Now, when it comes to rich people who give in to their desires instantly, they rob themselves of this. They do not have, or have much less of, this prolonged happiness time from just longing to get something. Story 34. Luck. Most people attribute their positions in life to hard work or something they created when, in actuality, it's a fair deal of luck. Rich PPL just happen to have good luck, and poor people happen to have bad luck when it comes to finances. Born into a wealthy family, highly intelligent, good health, etc., are all forms of good luck. You can do things to change your luck, like working hard, exercising, eating healthy, etc., but oftentimes it just comes down to luck. Crazy this life is. Story 35. Having an entire drawer in the kitchen with a highly organized array of takeout containers from past food deliveries. This is my friend's mom. She also has a closet packed with old shopping bags. Like, I can appreciate reusing stuff over throwing it away, but she clearly won't ever need all of them. And she's also worth like 20 million or something, which is why she can afford to dedicate a big wide kitchen drawer to countless plastic takeout containers of all sizes. Her dad founded one of the most famous NFL teams, BTW. Story 36. Speaking from experience, your hobbies are not everyone else's hobbies. They are more niche and expensive. My hobbies growing up were horseback riding, fencing, archery, knife and axe throwing, belly dancing, skiing, and snowmass Aspen, learning foreign languages. The first time I explained these to someone at work when we were discussing hobbies in teenage years, they stopped and asked me, "So, what was it like to grow up rich?" I was mortified because I honestly believed everyone around me was doing hobby classes. Maybe not fencing, but things like baseball, football, lacrosse, etc. I thought I just picked the really niche ones, not the expensive ones. Safe to say, I usually don't talk about it anymore. Story 37. There's a lot of comments focusing on spending. So are we talking upper middle class pretending to be rich, or are we talking rich people? Because truly rich people don't spend on unnecessary things. They only choose to hire people to take care of their home and kids if they don't have the time themselves. They won't have a membership to completely custom flights if they don't fly a lot, and they'll neither flaunt their wealth. Middle-class people flaunt their money. Rich people don't. Story 38. My friend's parents are both well off, like they both make six-figure salaries levels of well off. So my friend's first ever car was a 2015 Ford Mustang that costed $11,000. I remember her showing me this car, and me gushing about how cool it was and how I couldn't ever dream to own a car like this. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "It's not that expensive. You could afford this." $11,000 is quite literally 1/3 of my family's yearly salary. My first car, a 2007 Ford Focus, was only $2,500, and we had to save up for over a year to get it. Absolute delusions. Story 39. My partner has a friend who suggested one year we take a trip and use some of his Christmas money. We both grew up lower middle class, so neither of us ever got more than $100 from grandparents and other extended family any given Christmas, and that's generous. When my partner questioned his friend further, it turned out his various family members would send checks every December that were usually $1,000 each or more. He was surprised to learn this wasn't a universal experience. I've also had bosses who suggested I just take some time off and go away somewhere, and to just book a massage, So there's something in there about self-care, I guess. Story 40. I had a friend years ago who was studying and living at home ask me to go away on a trip with them. I said I'm not sure cause of my budget. I was working but living out of home and had bills. Her response was, "Can't you get money from your parents?" Absolutely serious, and got tight when I said my parents can't afford to fund my social life. Story 41, I run into this a lot. I have some rich friends who think when someone bills them, they have 30 days to pay, like housekeeper, dog walker, etc. People who came to do some job for $200. Most of these people expect to be paid immediately. I guess they assume everyone can float an invoice for 30 days. I've had to walk them through it. If someone sends me a bill and the work is complete, I pay it immediately. Why wait 30 days? Story 42. Old money actually is super frugal. You can tell old money from new if the former's house is kind of ratchet. It's freezing cold, and there's dog and or cat hair everywhere. Small TV, but there's good liquor. New money is dithery and uncomfortable. The way you look like you have real money is not to pay attention to anyone or anything. To look like you have basic rich, look relaxed, confident, and either a little amused or a little tired. A friend of mine grew up very poor and married a very rich man. She presents as rich because she does, wears, eats, acts, goes wherever she wants, and doesn't give a damn. So does he, and nor does he. Real money doesn't give a damn about designers and such. My friend rarely carries a handbag, for instance. Real money claims the right to set standards. Real money takes up space. Story 43. I student volunteered at a museum, and one of the other ladies was so rich and so clueless, but was actually so sweet I couldn't dislike her. Here are some of her gems. And to her, these were normal things. I can't wait until my girls are grown and gone. We're looking for a boarding school for my 14-year-old, but are having a hard time finding a good one that will let her bring her horse. My house is so big it takes 10 minutes just to walk from the bedroom to the kitchen, so I hardly ever see it. My other volunteer group had a sale. Turned out it was in a park, outside. They actually sold peanuts. My hair was so dry afterwards I had to get a half-inch cut off. Story 44, takeout. My dad's cousin, uncle, is unbelievably wealthy, but also irresponsible. He and his wife never cook. They only order takeout, and their fridge only ever has condiments. Maybe once a month some fruit, sodas, and egregious amounts of takeout boxes that will never be eaten. When we told him that a meal at Chick-fil-A is more expensive than a cheap cut of steak, he flipped out. Story 45. Setting their kids up for success. I live in a middle-lower class town that is surrounded by extremely wealthy towns. It's incredible the disparity in access to everything from sports clubs and coaches, tutors, college consultants, high-quality public schools. Wealthy kids in wealthy towns have an incredible advantage in life. Middle and lower-class parents can't afford the activities or tutors that allow their kids to compete with the rich kids for college enrollment. I wouldn't say that wealthy people don't know it, but I'm not sure they fully grasp the scope of the disparity. Story 46. It really depends on the definition of rich. Having $100 million rich, $10 million rich, $1 million rich, $100K rich? These could all be considered rich depending on your perspective. I think a person with money thing, rich or not, is knowing when to spend money and when not to, and not getting mired in debt. For most people who earn some money versus those who have it given to them, you learn that you can have money or spend it. You can't do both. The rich can do both. The rich on paper by no money to spend people can't do both. To 23-year-old me with 30 cents in my pocket and no idea how to pay rent, $100K seem unfathomably rich. Now in my 50s, it's easy to see that once you stop earning money, $100K doesn't get you very far in terms of continuing to live the same lifestyle. Story 47. I am not rich, but at one point, me and the gang were all going to go see a movie. I don't remember what. It was slightly cheaper to buy the tickets online than to get them at the theater, but that would have meant one person spending about $120 in one go for all the tickets. Two of my friends said that they didn't have $120 to spend up front, even though everyone else was going to pay them back for their share of the tickets almost immediately. It never occurred to me that a spontaneous temporary $120 purchase was something anyone would need to worry about. Story 48. Not necessarily very rich, but both me and my colleague are near 30 years old and we both just bought a house. Him in one country, me in a neighboring one, as the housing prices are way too high in my home country. I was talking about all the stuff that has to be done in a 1967 home and how long it will take to renovate. And he said, "Pfft, I understand. My furniture won't be delivered until 2 months from now." For me, the idea of buying a bunch of new furniture and having it all delivered is just insane. Story 49. I sort of think the compounding effect. During COVID, I got a wee bit distracted and just left all the earnings in the bank at 0%. Multiple currency accounts don't tend to have interest except Wise. I'm not a shill for them, but just get yourself a Wise account. Then about a year ago, I remembered I am grown up and started investing again in a very gradual way. Returns since starting investing again are the average wage. And most of that investment is in the past 3 months as it took me time to remember stuff. I still have 2 YRs worth of income to deploy. Unless we have a stock market crash, which I am hoping for, this time next year will be, I only work because I like solving problems and getting told I'm a good boy by clients, as the investments should be roughly close to my monthly billables. Year after, I am going to look silly for working on the spreadsheets. The funny thing is that even though compounding works for everyone, people with almost no money don't realize it could work for them or against them with credit cards. A spare $50 will actually do okay in the same way. 1. Not a financial advisor. 2. I'm an arsehole. 3. Yeah, I am good at what I do. Need some SQL stuff, MSG me. Reddit is probably better than LinkedIn. Story 50. Condemning zoos because of their harm to animals while suggesting anyone who wants to observe animals can just go on safari. That and boisterously, ignorantly going on and on about your travels around the world without being sensitive to how that might hit people whose daddies didn't make millions on stocks, and the accompanying profound lack of self-awareness. Story 51. Going to a doctor for a non-emergency. Driving recklessly specifically because you can afford the ticket without it impacting your livelihood. Buying a car new as its first-time owner. Having homeowners insurance or life insurance. Being able to afford people to do things like plumbing, renovation, new construction, or to work on your car for you, etc. Basically, not having to learn how to do it all yourself or be dependent on friends and family, but just hiring people to do work. Buying things like passports without saving up for them, much less traveling where that's required. Having landscapers. Honestly, it's just a really long list, but that's what comes to mind most readily. I always told myself that the day I can walk by a pizza box in a trash can and not at least open it to see if there is leftover pizza, then that's how I'll finally know I'm financially comfortable. I'm still looking forward to that day. Hopefully someday. Story 52. Oh, I have a relative who was very shocked and surprised to hear that it is possible to fly without paying extra for luggage. He asked around for proof. He had never heard of that, just that some check-in luggage is also included in the ticket price. That's never enough, and just of no importance for him. For him, this information was as new as it would be to some that you can leave the store with only half a loaf of bread and a piece of cheese in the shopping cart. He was profoundly devastated. Story 53. A rich person thing is not caring about special offers, coupon clipping, deals, etc. They don't seek them out, especially if it requires waiting in line or taking time off whatever else they would be doing or going out of the way. That being said, I know a few rich people who are insanely obsessed with getting deals and cheating the system. They have well over $30 million in dollar and still fight for little deals. I think they get a thrill out of it. Story 54. Having people do things for you. My ex grew up very well off, and when we were married, she couldn't do anything on her own. I'm not talking like complex things here either. We would share the chores around the house, and she didn't know how to clean, do laundry, cook, anything. Hell, she didn't even know how to use a vacuum. Her family had always had people do all those things for them. She asked me constantly if we could get a maid or a housekeeper. It was ridiculous. Story 55, underplanning. Example, a guy I know bought a big expensive boat, discovered his SUV wasn't powerful enough to comfortably tow it, so he brought a new truck. A smart, non-rich person knows weights and ratings on everything, and it factors into the boat that they purchase. A non-rich person either parks the boat indefinitely or ends up selling it for a down payment on a used car after they blow their transmission hauling the boat. Story 56. I don't realize having lots of paid household help was that big of a deal. As a raised-in-America child, we had a driver. I knew that was unusual, full-time. A maid, full-time. A nanny, full-time. And 2 women who came to wash our clothes multiple times a week, part-time. I knew we were fortunate, but it never occurred to me most people never had any help at all. Story 57. The idea that having a high vibration will rid me of being marginalized, subtly discriminated, or gatekept from financial security and treated with basic human dignity and respect. They don't understand their access to education, looks, connections, money. Their longtime history of being prioritized and favored is the reason their negative qualities don't have consequences that could change their future. Job, relationships. Story 58. My uncle, rich by my standards, but perhaps in modern-day America would only be considered comfortable by some, purchased 2 NJ Shore beach houses, had them leveled, and built a new, bigger, several million-dollar multi-floor beach house on the site. He was encouraged to do this because the previous year, he bought a Florida multi-floor condo dwelling with an elevator as a rental property and was introduced to how cheap getting an elevator could be. So he contracted with the parent company and had an elevator designed into his NJ project plans, and they installed as the new home was being built. After the first year, he complained about the electric bill and maintenance costs for the elevator. My cousins enjoyed riding the elevator for hours at a time on their days off school. He came to a decision that no one could ride the elevator on weekdays so that he could save wear and tear. Story 59. Been around a lot of new money rich who were friends or bosses or whatever. I can't recall any of them ever saying something like, they didn't understand what it was like to not have money. That is because they started like that. They understand. The worst of it would be when they talk about their luxurious, very expensive vacation, but they were not suggesting you should go or that you could. They were just talking about their vacation like anybody else would. It is just a more expensive one. They would not have a lot to talk about if they couldn't talk about what they did, even if it was expensive. Only thing I have seen were kids of rich people in college. They may or may not apply themselves at college, and they knew they would have a job on getting out regardless. Some of them were screwballs. Yet one friend's father was a billionaire, and you would have never known it if he didn't tell you. His father was CEO of a large well-known oil company. This guy was pretty much just like anybody else in college. He worked to get good grades. He had issues socializing when entering college and having to make new friends. I believe he suffered from depression and anxiety. Basically, he was a dorky college kid like me. Didn't know his family was filthy rich for a while. He lived in the dorms just like everyone else, had roommate problems just like everyone else, made friends and got a better roommate like everyone else, graduated, and on he went. Story 60. Having free time. So much advice from rich people on how to improve your life or make money requires you to seemingly have endless free time to do so. Like even relationship advice from celebrities where they suggest having breakfast and a conversation about your day goals with your partner every day to improve your bond. I wake up for work before the sun's up and I'm out of the house within 20 minutes. I'm lucky if I get to finish my toast before running out the door, let alone waking my partner up for a long chat while we sip tea. Story 61. I had a prominent rich man who, at dinner, pulled in close and said, "Do you want to know the secret to money?" I said, "Of course." He continued, "You take the money you earn and put some away, you pay your bills, and then what's left over you can do stuff like take your lady out, buy her something nice." He was serious. At the moment I was thinking I was about to have this incredibly insightful moment. Story 62. I've been so poor that as a child the school lunch was often the only meal I had all day. As an adult I dug through couch cushions in my car to try to scrounge up enough money to buy anything to eat. I'm now retired. The house and cars are completely paid off, and we have budgeted to take one big trip every year. The years in between were filled with long hours and damn hard work. I still am frugal on lots of things. I still usually buy store brands and use electronic coupons. Old habits are hard to break. Story 63. Wealthy people do not understand their access to healthcare. They have no idea how privileged they are to just see whatever healthcare provider they need to see. I grew up wealthy but now live a very different lifestyle. It's so frustrating to realize I can't see a doctor because I can't afford the copay, or to see my friends and loved ones not even afford insurance. But it's significantly more frustrating to see my in-laws deny my wife money when she can't afford healthcare when I know they can afford it. At least my parents understand they're in the 1% and they pitch in when we need help. Story 64. Making plans for other people that cost money, especially regarding travel and leisure. Identifying the hotel everyone should stay in, telling people the plans and itineraries, selecting restaurants, etc. My rich family members have hearts of gold and do get hit up for money a ton by family, but they just don't think of what a couple $100 or $1,000 of unexpected and unnecessary expenses mean to most people. Story 65. It's ski trips. I am rich person adjacent, by connections not social class, and I spent so much on the skiing for my kids, I cannot afford it. As in, I would not plan a ski trip for myself. I have a kid in private college because he was awarded some pretty amazing scholarships, and still, it's ski trips. I don't even mean to the Swiss Alps, to Banff, to Salt Lake City either. I can barely afford the East Coast American venues we can save money by driving to. It's been his birthday/Christmas present the last few years, as he believes these trips bid connections that will help his career. Story 66. Being able to save money each month. I used to have a friend that earned 5x the salary I did, and they would often give me the advice to just put some of my salary aside each month because then you won't have to be anxious about money. When I told them that I had absolutely no opportunity to do that, they acted like I just didn't want to, often with the words, "Just do it. It's not that hard." Do I need to say that I am no longer friends with them, lol?